Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Castriota, and as Dr. Engel already said, I'm a member of the Radicalism Group at Northampton University, but I'm also a lecturer in terrorism studies and fascism studies at Oxford. I'm Italian originally, and I actually have the privilege, I have to thank Dr. Engel to including me in this project of monitoring the rise of nationalisms in Europe. So I collaborated with a report on Italy. The problem with Italy is that us Italians, we are a little bit contradictory and complicated. We invented pizza and spaghetti, as I usually say, but we also invented the word ghetto, and we also invented fascism. So in other words, we also have this kind of like a contradictory nature in our history and in our political culture. Now, the problem that we have in Italy at the moment is extremely serious because A, we don't have an elected parliament, an elected government, since 2014. B, we have a race in ultra-nationalism, xenophobia, racism, and we also have C, a very kind of like difference and fragmentation of the territory, politically and socially and economically, obviously. And on the top of this, we also now are facing, like everybody else in Europe, the emergency of the Syrian refugees that seems to be difficult to handle. Now, briefly, I'd like to try to explain or discuss with you or talk with you about the situation in my country regarding ultra-nationalism. First of all, I'd like to say that historically speaking, and also socially and politically speaking, Italy has never expelled totally the virus of fascism. I mean, fascism in Italy hasn't finished with the end of Mussolini, or the execution of Mussolini on the 30th of April 1945 by the partisans, because the mistake of the initial government in 1946 was actually to pardon the former fascists and give them the opportunity to constitute a legitimate political party. So they have been in the system ever since. In other words, they never went away. Also, there's never been a serious program of denazification of the country at any level. We also have a very strange relationship with the notion of identity and the notion of authority. In matter of identity, Italy is made by different people, different populations. The north of the country is ethnically very different from the south of the country, for instance. And also, with the concept of authority, Italians don't seem to have a mature relationship with authority. Like, in other words, we tend necessarily to look at our own interest of our clan, our family, but at the same time, we are ready to follow the leader that comes along and can lead us towards a golden future. Look at Berlusconi's fortune, for instance. Or during Mussolini times where in order to work and to have any kind of activity, Italians had to take the membership of the fascist party, and in Italian is Partito Nazionale Fascista, which is, the acronym was PNF, which in Italian also means, many Italians joked about that, per necessità familiare. So in other words, it looks always that we accommodate ourselves to what is the best solution for us without looking at the collective benefit or the collective welfare of the community. Going back to ours today is very paradoxical for me and very tragic in a sense that a country that saved a lot of Jews during World War II, during the Nazi occupation, during a fascist regime, today has become so incredibly xenophobic and intolerant. Anti-Semitism is on the rise as well. We have more and more like groups and political parties that actually are becoming popular. Populism is the key word to understand today Italian politics. The left wing is becoming weaker and weaker, so there is not a good balance between the different political forces. The two parties that nowadays seem, one is a party, one is a movement actually with political aspiration, they are becoming quite popular and successful, unfortunately, in Italy are, one is the Lega Nord, Northern League in English, originally a party that wanted the separation of Italy in two, the north from the south. The kind of morphology of the party is pagan. They refer to the Celtic mythology. They say to themselves that they are a different race, I quote. So they are very much different from people from the south like myself. I still remember in 1990s when in their rallies they used to burn in effigy people from the south, the kind of the sample of the person from the south, like myself, for instance. So nowadays they have diverted their kind of xenophobic hate towards immigrants, especially Muslim. The current leader of the party is very successful, is very popular. We fear that it might be winning the next political election, which will bring Italy together with France with a possible, I hope not, victory in the next election next year of Marine Le Pen. If that would happen, the future of European Union as a whole is actually in jeopardy, because obviously this will mean that all the values, A, we haven't learned anything from the period of Nazism and fascism, and B, Europe has a serious talk. I mean, they have to actually look again at what Europe or European Union means. The refugee crisis has precipitated in Italy the situation. So what used to be the feeling of few, or this radical neo-fascist, or this radical nationalist, is becoming more and more the trend of the average Joe. So nowadays, for instance, I like to say that in December 2015, the Lega Nord gathered 50.1% of the votes in the local election that I had in the north of Italy. So this is quite exemplificative of what is going to happen. The other movement is Casa Pound Italia. It's a neo-fascist movement that has been set up at the end of the 1990s. Originally the typical neo-fascist hooligans, but with aspiration, social aspiration. If you look on their websites and if you read their publications, they really look quite approachable. They are for a social kind of like policy. They want to give the housing to the Italians who don't have house. So in other words, they look not that scary. In reality, if you look better the language that they use, you can actually detect quite a strong, hardcore fascism in there. In fact, they've been manipulating last summer a lot of xenophobic manifestation in Rome, in particular, in areas where the authorities had created a hostel for refugees. So at the moment, because I need to keep short, I want to conclude saying that we should actually be more aware. It's not just Italy, it's Poland, it's Hungary, it's France, it's Greece. To a certain extent, Germany is also starting to see this kind of populist, ultra-nationalist populism with Alternative für Deutschland, for instance, or Pegida. So we need to be very, very aware, because no one says that because it happened in 70 years ago now, cannot happen again. Circumstances might be different, but the same virus is biting again Europe, I think. So we really need to be more aware, and the kind of educating young generations on the Holocaust is quite important, because they need to understand that what happened 70 years ago is not in history books. It can happen again, it happens again, it's happening again, and in a sense, we need to defend this kind of memory of the Holocaust, because we are all Jewish in a sense. In other words, we need to make this kind of a human tragedy, a collective tragedy. It's not just the tragedy of the Jewish population, it's the tragedy of everybody, or every rational being, really, because I like to conclude on this. Populism is irrational, fascism is irrational, and Nazism is even more irrational. So we need to be careful that Europe is not taken again by this irrational wave, so to speak. Thank you.